Hi, Peter Carter here, a video for the Climate Emergency Institute. This video is great reminiscing for me. It's a video on the World Peoples Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth that was held by the government of Bolivia on April the 22nd, 2010. Right now I'm going to play you a short clip from Democracy Now! Amy Goodman for Democracy Now! Was at the Cochabamba, Bolivia World Peoples Climate Conference, and she broadcast on the first day some very useful background and a interview with Pablo Salon, the UN Bolivian ambassador, with some very significant background on what happened at the Copenhagen Climate Conference in 2009.
In Cochabamba, Bolivia. Yes, it's remarkable that we are here in Tiquipaya, just outside Cochabamba. Today marks the start of the World's Peoples Summit on Climate Change and Rights of Mother Earth. Bolivian President Evo Morales called for the gathering to give the poor in Global South an opportunity to respond to the failed climate talks in Copenhagen. We're joined right now by Pablo Salon, Bolivia's ambassador to the United Nations. Talk about this summit that's about to begin in this building in just a few hours. Why did President Morales call it?
Well, the problem is that in Copenhagen, we didn't come out with a commitment from the developed countries in order to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions for the second period of the Kyoto Protocol. The main issue is that if there isn't a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, what we are going to see is that temperature is going to rise 2 degrees more in this century, and it even can go to 4, 5, or even 6. If this happens, many islands are going to disappear, some are states, our glaciers are going to melt here in the Andean mountains and also in the Himalayas. We are going to see a problem of food. Almost 40% of the food of the world is threatened because of the increase of temperature. But what we are seeing is that this is not going to happen if there is not social pressure, if the social movements around the world don't begin to organize and to build a very broad coalition that makes and puts a lot of pressure, especially into developed country governments, in order that they do real commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from here until 2020. From here until 2020.
And here am I making this video in the first week of January 2019, and the Global Carbon Project recently reported that global emissions of carbon dioxide increased substantially in 2018, and they had also increased in 2017. This is reminiscing for me because I was there and thoroughly enjoyed the event. It was a most amazing event. It was truly democratic. There were people from all over the world. Of course, a lot of indigenous people from all over the world, which made it extremely colorful and delightful. Everybody got on well, there were no problems whatsoever. This despite the fact that the attendance was double what was expected. The attendance was 35,000 people. There was no interference by the government of Bolivia whatsoever. They provided the venue. They also provided young stewards, and the whole thing worked like clockwork. The people did a lot of hard work. This was a work conference. The work went through in various groups all day, and so I'll take you through the World Peoples Conference on Climate Change Peoples Agreement. Today our Mother Earth is wounded and the future of humanity is in danger. If global warming increases by more than 2 degrees Celsius, a situation that the Copenhagen Accord could lead to, that was the lame result of the failed UN Copenhagen Climate Conference in 2009, there is a 50% probability that the damages caused to our Mother Earth will be completely irreversible. Between 20 and 30% of species, that is 20 to 30% more species. We are in the 6th mass extinction already. Large expanses of forest would be affected. Droughts and floods would affect different regions of the planet. Deserts would expand, and the melting of the polar ice caps and the glaciers in the Andes and the Himalayas would worsen. Many island states would disappear, and Africa would suffer an increase in temperature of more than 3 degrees Celsius. Likewise, the production of food would diminish in the world, causing catastrophic impacts on the survival of inhabitants from vast regions in the planet. And the number of people in the world suffering from hunger would increase dramatically, a figure that already exceeds 1 billion people. The corporations and governments of the so-called developed countries, in complicity with a segment of the scientific community, have led us to discuss climate change as a problem limited to the rise in temperature, without questioning the cause, which is the capitalist system. We confront the terminal crisis of a civilizing model that is patriarchal and based on the submission and destruction of human beings and nature that has accelerated since the Industrial Revolution. The capitalist system has imposed on us a logic of competition, progress, and limitless growth. This regime of production and consumption seeks profit without limits, separating human beings from nature, and imposing a logic of domination upon nature, transforming everything into commodities: water, earth, the human genome, ancestral cultures, biodiversity, justice, ethics, the rights of people, and life itself. Under capitalism, Mother Earth is converted into a source of raw materials, and human beings into consumers and a means of production, into people that are seen as valuable only for what they own and not for what they are. Capitalism requires a powerful military industry for its processes of accumulation and imposition of control over territories and natural resources. It is imperative that we forge a new system that restores harmony with nature and among human beings. And in order for there to be balance with nature, there must first be equity among human beings. We propose to the peoples of the world the recovery, revalorization, and strengthening of the knowledge, wisdom, and ancestral practices of indigenous peoples, recognizing Mother Earth as a living being with which we have an indivisible, interdependent, complementary, and spiritual relationship. To face climate change, we must recognize Mother Earth as a source of life and forge a new system based on the principles of harmony and balance among all and with all things, complementarity, solidarity, and equality, collective well-being, and the satisfaction of the basic necessities of all, people living in harmony with nature, the recognition of human beings for what they are, who they are, not what they own, elimination of all forms of colonialism, imperialism, and interventionism, and peace among the peoples and with Mother Earth. The model we support is not a model of limitless and destructive development. All countries need to produce the goods and services necessary to satisfy the fundamental needs of their populations. But by no means can they continue to follow the path of development that has led the richest countries to have an ecological footprint 5 times bigger than what the planet is able to support. Currently, the regenerative capacity of the planet has already been exceeded by more than 30%. If this pace of over-exploitation of our Mother Earth continues, we will need 2 planets by the year 2030. In an interdependent system in which human beings are only one component, it is not possible to recognize rights only to the human part without provoking an imbalance in the system as a whole. To guarantee human rights and restore harmony with nature, it is necessary to effectively recognize and apply the rights of Mother Earth. For this purpose, we propose an attached project for the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth, in which it is recorded that the right to live and to exist, the right to be respected, the right to regenerate biocapacity and to continue vital cycles and processes free of human alteration, the right to maintain identity and integrity as differentiated beings, self-regulated and interrelated, the right to water as the source of life, the right to clean air, the right to comprehensive health, the right to be free of contamination and pollution, free of toxic and radioactive waste, the right to be free of alterations or modifications of genetic structures in a manner that threatens integrity of vital and healthy functioning. This next item I want to emphasize, and I'm also linking it with a couple of items which come later on in the text. This one is the right to prompt and full restoration for violations to the rights acknowledged in this declaration caused by human activities. And the other parts of the text as follows. We demand the full and effective implementation of the right to consultation, participation, and prior, free, and informed consent of indigenous peoples in all negotiation process, and in the design and implementation of measures related to climate change. And then I'm turning on to extracts with regards to food production. Agribusiness, through its social, economic, and cultural model of global capitalist production and its logic of producing food for the market and not to fulfill the right to proper nutrition, is one of the principal causes of climate change. Its technological, commercial, and political approach only serves to deepen the climate change crisis and increase hunger in the world. For this reason, and this is most important, for this reason we reject free trade agreements and association agreements and all forms of the application of intellectual property rights to life, current technological packages, agrochemicals, genetic modification, and those that offer false solutions to climate change, biofuels, geoengineering, nanotechnology, etc., that only exacerbate the current crisis. And the free trade agreements are so critically important because they equal corporate rule. How is it that free trade agreements give corporate rule, and why are these free trade agreements so bad for us? Actually, the free trade agreements free corporations up from national regulations. They are undemocratic and anti-democratic agreements negotiated between national trade departments in which the citizens, the public, have no say, that give large corporations new powers of private ownership over government, social, and environmental regulations, therefore, in effect, more corporate deregulation. The largest corporations, which are the multinational investment banking corporations, the fossil fuel corporations, freed of socio-environmental constraints, rule and are destroying the world. The classic work, the classic book on this is David C. Corton's When Corporations Rule the World. The shared vision here seeks to stabilize the concentrations of greenhouse gases, to make effective Article 2 of the United Nations 1992 Framework Convention on Climate Change, which states that the stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere to a level that prevents dangerous anthropogenic, that is human-sourced, interferences with the climate system. Our vision is based on the principle of historical common but differentiated responsibilities, which is within that convention, to demand that developed countries commit with quantifiable goals of emissions reduction that will allow us to return the concentrations of greenhouse gases to 300 parts per million, and therefore the increase in the average world temperature to a maximum of 1 degree Celsius. Today, the global temperature increase is 1 degree C, and looking at this chart of impacts at increasing degrees of global equilibrium warming, that is warming from pre-industrial, published by the International Energy Agency in 2008 from the IPCC 2007 assessment. As you see, all of these predicted adverse impacts, they are already happening. I'm now inserting another bit of the text that comes later that I'm not actually going to cover in the video. And this is another crucially important statement from the People's Agreement, which says, we categorically reject the illegitimate Copenhagen Accord of 2009 that allows developed countries to offer insufficient reductions in greenhouse gases based in voluntary and individual commitments, actually they're not commitments, violating the environmental integrity of Mother Earth and leading us toward an increase in global temperature of around 4 degrees C. Well, we're in 2019, and current emissions have us on track for a warming above 4 degrees. But if you look down here and see the impact, the multiple catastrophic and world-ending impacts of 4 degrees C, you'll see how important this statement was at the time at the Cochabamba Peoples Conference in 2010. Here's that Global Carbon Project recently released report on CO2 emissions for 2018, which I've already shown has kicked up to a huge degree, a 2.7% increase over 1 year. And this is where we were in 2009, the Copenhagen Accord, and the year later, the World Peoples Cochabamba Climate Conference. So in 2009, emissions were 34.5 gigatons of CO2, and now they are much higher at 37.1 gigatons. And I can predict, I'm afraid confidently, that next year they'll be that much higher again. Now I'm going to stop here and leave you with the website. This is a very impressive document. Having read it right through again after this period of time, it's more relevant and more useful today than ever. In summary, it would seem to me that the People's Climate Agreement is a natural for the new Extinction Rebellion movement. It's certainly the best, most comprehensive, most democratic document we have on climate change. The Guardian, interesting headline on the 23rd of April 2010, said the grassroots summit calls for an international climate court, and also that it called for a global climate referendum. It said that Cochabamba conference closes with call for rich countries to halve greenhouse gas emissions and set up a court to punish climate crime. The government of Bolivia did try hard to have the United Nations accept it. It didn't. The main points that I got out of my reread was the International Climate Crime Tribunal. Rich countries must reduce emissions substantially before 2020. Rich countries should transfer funds and technologies to the poor, most vulnerable parties and pay their atmospheric climate debt. The global equilibrium warming danger limit is 1 degree C and the atmospheric CO2 limit 300 parts per million. Indigenous customary law and rights must supersede corporate credit capitalism, and that a deep peace must be established amongst peoples and with Mother Nature or Mother Earth. Obviously, global carbon dioxide emissions have to decline, and they have to decline on an immediate time frame basis, and they have to decline rapidly. And this is what the IPCC 2018 1.5 degree C report shows. This is from that report. This gray is emissions here, and here is 2020, and as you see, the global CO2 emissions decline rapidly from 2020. Governments can readily make that happen. All they have to do is to stop subsidizing fossil fuel industry and put a realistic price on carbon pollution emissions. That carbon price has to be charged to the polluters, namely the fossil fuel corporations. Here is today's atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration. As you can see, a constant and rapid acceleration in the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This is since industrialization, 1740 here, and this is December 2018 from the Scripps Institute, showing 410 parts per million of CO2. So almost 10 years after the Cochabamba Peoples Climate Statement, a lot of people very reasonably are asking, is it too late? Well, it's never too late to act, and it's never too late to continue to attempt to force governments to do what they have to do. The general content of the People's Agreement shows really what has to happen. Actions have to be taken by those who really can make a big difference, and also those responsible for the accelerating deadly atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. And those parties are the highest emitting country governments, their national science institutions, multinational fossil fuel corporations, multinational investment banks, the largest automobile corporations, and the largest militaries. That's where the power lies, which is today putting more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This same power can stop doing that and rebuild the world rapidly for clean, renewable, that's everlasting, non-combustion energy. Governments have been told by the IPCC for at least the past 20 years over and over that they have to put carbon dioxide emissions into a rapid decline. And since the fourth assessment in 2007, that has to be by 2020. Not taking immediate action on this situation of atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration, highest in the past 3 to 5 million years, is a definite death sentence for the future of humanity and almost all life on Earth. A final quote from the statement, "We the peoples have the equal right to be protected from the adverse effects of climate change and reject the notion of adaptation to climate change as understood as a resignation to impacts provoked by the historical emissions of developed countries, which themselves must adapt their modes of life and consumption in the face of this global emergency." It goes without saying that the rebellion against the now rapidly accelerating extinction has to force the termination of fossil fuel subsidies, and that the big global investment banks must be held accountable for their main driving role in destroying the life-supporting biosphere.